The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Beloved, good day, good day, good day. What a joy it is to greet you on this day as we come together. We want to say Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and just let you know that we're sending love out to you and greetings to all of you. Black fathers matter, and so we want to lift up all of our fathers up there, giving God thanks and praise for who you are and what you're about, and how you have lived your lives. Today we're going to be focusing on a very, very serious challenge in the land of my birth, South Africa. Today's show is entitled Man Up, Standing Against Gender-Based Violence. Man Up, Standing Against Gender-Based Violence. This is Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls, and it is a joy for me to have you with us. Today, all of our guests will join us from the Republic of South Africa. We will have individuals who've been working on the ground against gender-based violence, and also we will be having a faith-based perspective with a colleague of mine from South Africa. And then our hope is that later on we will be joined by Mzwakhe Mbule. He is the people's poet, MZ, Comrade MZ, to share some of his works around the stands that he has taken around gender-based violence. One of his albums is called Gender-Based Violence Must Fall. So it is very, very, it's actually an epidemic in South Africa. And as a person of faith, who has a sister, who has nieces, and who has grandnieces, if that is actually a term, this certainly concerns me. But most importantly, it concerns me because we are talking about the violation of the humanity and the dignity of girls, of women, of mothers, of aunts, and of us as a society. What a deterioration we are dealing with. And so the epidemic of gender-based violence certainly is affecting South Africa in a disastrous way. So these are, aside from dealing with COVID-19 right now, the epidemic, of gender-based violence is one that has been a precondition prior to COVID-19, and it will continue to be that challenge. And COVID-19 actually has exacerbated that challenge, and we will hear from those who will be joining us. We're doing this show today on Father's Day to really celebrate and affirm fathers, of course, but to also be in alignment with a huge event that took place in South Africa that was organized by Act Now. Today there was a caravan of cars from Nasrec, which is right in Johannesburg, to the Union Buildings. That is like the White House in South Africa, where the President of South Africa, that's where his office is, and that's where the executive branch, do the governing and the work that they have to do for the Republic of South Africa. And they were having a car caravan all the way to the capital of Pretoria, and there were some conversations, and they were received by conversations with the president, and they were received by the president. I'm going to put on the flyer for that, event, and I want to thank my brother and friend Ricky Samuels for connecting me, with this. And we are in the process of connecting with ACT now to do another event around this, just to continue to support our women and our men in South Africa, are working on this challenge. And we are saying that, yes, as men and as boys, we stand against, gender-based violence in South Africa and anywhere in the world. I want to play the promotional video for this event because you now can hear some of the voices from some of the men, who are leaders of ACT now, and they have been working on this event, and so we want to bring in their voices. And following that, we will welcome my first two guests, who will be talking about the challenge in South Africa, the situation, this epidemic, and how we can, move beyond, the challenge of violence against women. Let's check out this promotional video, and then we'll be back on the other side.
If we are to regard ourselves as the heads of our household, presently many of us are brain damaged.
Ewe Nanja, who do you think you are? Murdering, killing. Stop this rubbish.
Is it your beard? Is it your voice? Is it your strength? No, love, protection, support makes you a man.
Time is up on abuse, harassment, denial, rape.
It's enough.
Let's act now to ensure that femme bodies are protected.
No to violence against women.
You see it, you report it. We are coming. We need you to stop.
Stop killing women and children.
Act now. Join the Men and Boys Car Drive March on Father's Day, 21 June at 9 a.m. as we depart from Nazareth to Union Buildings. Hashtag Act Now.
As you can see, men are standing up. They've been standing up against violence against women, and they will continue to do that. And we are so proud of our brothers in South Africa for the work that they are pulling together and doing there. I am joined today by two of my first guests. These are sisters that I know and work with, appreciate them and respect their leadership. Dorah Marema is joining me. She has been working on gender and women issues for many, many, many years. She currently is the director of Gender CC Southern Africa, Women for Climate Justice. She's also the director of SEED Community that works with young women and girls to access education, and also runs Girls Talk, one of the biggest platforms for girls in Southern Africa. They are connecting thousands of girls across the continent of Africa between the ages of 14 and 25 through mobile platforms. Girls Talk Africa, is a safe space where girls and young women can talk, share their stories, stay informed, and stay engaged as mentors. I also have to mention that Dorah is also one of the fellows for the Atlantic Fellows for Racial Equity. That's the fellowship that I'm a part of, and the two of us are fellows in there. And in fact, we just transitioned to senior fellows, and Dorah has just been a blessing, on that, and really appreciate her passion and her commitment to the empowerment of girls and women. So glad to have Dorah with us. Also, I want to welcome Diane Hoorzuk, another sister of mine. She is the vice chair of the board of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. We serve on that board together, a global organization that works on serving people living with HIV/AIDS, but not just that, but is an organization that brings relief as well as medical services to many communities around the world. And she's my elder on that board. Love and appreciate her and the work that she's doing, not just as a board member, but she's also a member of various committees in South Africa and has worked on challenging gender-based violence, preventing gender-based violence in so many ways. And I'm so glad that she made herself available to join as well. So we're going to see if we have them all up on Skype right now. Dorah, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Welcome, my sister. It's good to see you, and glad we're able to connect around this. Let me see if Diana is there. Diana, are you there? Okay, we'll continue to try and get Diane. Dorah, let me start with you. I know that you've been, on the front lines against gender-based violence. Not just its prevention, but also intervention. Around this, and also the legislative transformation. Around this, and we know that some of our there has been some legislation that the president, talked about, but we'll get to that in a minute. But can you, in the work that you've been doing, just talk with us a little bit about this challenge, of gender-based violence, in South Africa? How are we? Did we lose Dorah? Okay, we'll get back. We'll get Dorah back. In a few minutes. But we're going to be just talking about, how we got to where we are first, and then talk about root causes of gender-based violence, and then try and get as soon as we can to some of the solutions, around this, both grassroots, community-based, as well as civil society, faith-based community, and then of course we'll talk about what the government is doing, around, fighting gender-based violence. So let me see if we have Dorah back. Do we have Diane? Okay, so we'll continue to pull them in, as we share in that. But this past week, this was triggered for me when I was sent a very, very disturbing video by a sister friend of mine, Denise Davidson, sent a very, very disturbing video of a young lady that was kidnapped. She was sexually abused, and then, she was hung. And that, was just the, I think, in so many ways, what got me, that broke the camel's back for me in terms of something, we need to begin to build, not just local, national, but transnational, allyship now around this. And then, of course, my brother friend Ricky Samuels sent me the work that ACT Now, is doing, and this car march that they planned for today, and that was just a culmination, an emotional culmination for me around this huge challenge. While being in Los Angeles and working with several faith leaders and community-based leaders around what's happening with police violence here in Los Angeles, so it's all just coming together in terms of just violence against Black people, and some of it, of course, done by law enforcement. But for today, we're going to be talking about what's really happening, about what we are also doing to one another, especially, in the land of my birth, South Africa. I think we have Dorah back. Dorah, thanks we're gonna make our way through whatever technical difficulties we have, because this is a conversation that's long overdue. Can you tell us, Dorah, if you will, your assessment of the state of this epidemic of gender-based violence in South Africa?
I think at the moment, really, it has reached such unprecedented levels, and I think, it has always been like this, right? And I think it's a matter of those cases that make the headlines, and also the access to reporting for those who are able to report, that makes it look like it's really, really, gotten out of hand. But I think it has been always happening. I remember the work that we've been doing with girls, and in 2013 we did a road show going into villages and to have conversations with women, including some of the seed community girls that we work with. And they've been telling us, look, this thing has been happening to our mothers, it is happening to us, and it will definitely happen to our children. It's really gotten out of hand, and I think we are not getting a hang of it. We are not getting a hang of it because I believe that we are not really going to the root of the problem. We are not addressing the root, and it keeps on coming. As right now, things are really tough economically. So many people are really stressed and psychologically affected by this COVID-19. And we start to see the pressure that everyone is feeling in society, and the women continue to take the brunt of it in many fronts, right? From the care to now this violence where they're just literally being killed in droves.
Yeah, that's just so challenging. But we have to admit that this challenge, existed pre-COVID-19. And so when we want to talk about, root causes, while understanding that COVID-19 has exacerbated the challenge, because when people say, stay home to be safe, well, home is not necessarily safe for everybody, in family, in community, around that. How would you describe some of the root causes of just this ongoing, challenge, of gender-based violence?
It's important to highlight that the root causes is that many of our people come from broken homes, and many of our young men and young boys don't have role models. They don't have someone that they would look up to. I had this morning in one of our church services online a young man reciting the statistic that mentions the probability of a young man that grows in a home without a father, what that will do to him, that they are more likely to become a perpetrator, or even to become what we would call a sexual abuser, because of that. Like, firstly, not having role models, but also secondly, coming from just broken homes where there are high levels of poverty, and they see their parents struggle so much, and there's a lot of anger that grows in this young man, and being exposed to the social ills that in society, the inequality that continues to exist in this country unabated, is also something that puts young men and boys in a very, very difficult position. From a young age, there's a high expectation on them to provide and to become heads of households, and from a very young age that there's a pressure on them to be able to go and generate money to be able to support their families. So until we go to the root of the problem, where we really, even from a socialization point of view, those with homes of both parents and boys are just treated indifferently from the girls, where girls usually are expected to do the care work, and which is not valued and paid, and boys are really being glorified to become like kings and princes, and that have to be served. and it's part of culture that perpetuates that. It's also another challenge that we need to. So there are multiple issues and multiple fundamental things that lead to this challenge that we face, where women continuously from a young age being viewed as things that can be used, that needs to serve others. High expectation and on young women that is mostly unwarranted, if you like. And I think there are a number of levers of change that needs to be pulled for us to be able to arrive at a place where we raise a well-rounded young man in our homes and society at large, recognizing those without the fathers, those without the role models, that needs to be mentored and coached in terms of how to become a responsible man in a family or even in a country.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. And also, you're touching on several things that I just want to lift up out of everything that you've said. One is we certainly in South Africa living in a culture infected with and affected by patriarchy. And part of patriarchy, is, and sometimes people use scripture to justify that. One aspect of patriarchy is, just this notion around women being inferior, right? And then when you add to that, what comes then, with a system of, racialized capitalism, right? You then, not only are women then, looked at in terms of inferiority, but also we're dealing with the objectification of, women, especially, from a sexualized way. Patriarchy, of course, is all about power. When we look at this incident that caught my attention, that was sent to me, about, this, woman, her name is Chakofatso, Pule. There was just outcry around what happened to, Sister Pule. She was found stabbed and hanging from a tree. That's the word we received here, through, BBC News. What role do you think patriarchy, this notion of the inferiority of women, as well as, the objectification, of the bodies of women, just for not I don't even know whether it's satisfaction or not, but just this power over, can you just give me a sense around that?
Obviously, patriarchy is such a fundamental problem in our country, and I think that is the root cause of many other things, and it has existed for many decades unabated. And I think it's it will take. It's a system that continues to persist, which needs to be dismantled. Like I say, when you look at it, it starts from the home. And today I read a tweet that was talking about it will be taboo for a man to go and move his plates, after he had lunch or dinner, or even get next to a stove to be able to cook. And I think these are some of the things I cannot believe in this century that we live in, that we're raising our girls as almost like slaves, and men as kings because of this patriarchy. And I think patriarchy it lends itself in so many other places, in the workplace, in community structures, even in some form of government. It is one of the things that needs to be uprooted completely. And I think it's there are, and for some reason, culture it's used as a way to perpetuate patriarchy, where we think, and I think culture needs to evolve with the times. We need to evolve with the times. We cannot continue continue like this, or even try and solve the problems that we face of patriarchy using the same systems and the same approaches that brought us this problem in the first place. And you talk about capitalism, you talk about the objectification of women, and I think it is.
Okay, did we lose her? Good. Do we have Portia on? We have Diane. Okay. Diane, are you there?
I'm here.
Hey, how you doing, my sister?
I'm good, and you?
Good, good, good. Thanks for working through us with the technology pieces. Glad you're able to be on. I mentioned earlier on about your ongoing work in South Africa, on various committees, whether it is dealing with, social issues locally or political issues locally as well as nationally. Vice chair, of course, of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, where we serve together. And we are just in the process, of just talking about, how do we get to this challenge, of gender-based violence. I know it's been going on for a while, but it's really, got to a head for me this past week when I, received, within the last 24 hours, some information about Sister Pule, and who was found stabbed and hung on the tree. Through, I got that through BBC, news. But I wanted to, talk with you as a woman leader, one who, has been involved in, politics. Just, what's the situation around gender-based violence? How did we get here?
How do you get in, or how do you get it?
No. What is the situation right now around gender-based violence in South Africa? And how did we get to where we are?
The situation is really bad.
Yeah.
And when you talk about gender-based violence, you can't just only attribute it to death and what you see. Gender-based violence, you have what you will call the mental degradation of your brain, which then gives people that which says, I need to end my life, or they go into fits of depression. So gender-based violence in South Africa is very rife. You have communities who have small little houses. You have one room where you have 4 and 5 people living in a room, and that doesn't help a situation. That exacerbates the situation. Then you come to just the general drug problem in South Africa. The drug problem has escalated to such a level that half the time some of these people that are doing what they're doing is not because they are in their right minds. They are not in their right minds.
Wow. Yeah, I'm certainly aware of that drug challenge. My hometown, as you know, El Dorado Park, is currently gripped in that, that challenge, of, drug abuse and just how it's destroying lives and families. How has COVID-19 exacerbated or worsened the challenge of gender-based violence, especially, as you mentioned, the social conditions, especially the living conditions that has people together in such close proximity? Of course, that creates, challenges too. But how has COVID-19, contributed to the challenge of gender-based violence?
Yeah, well, gender-based violence and COVID-19 work hand in hand. Mm-hmm. There is, you cannot separate the two. Imagine people living for 76 days all together in one room, mm-hmm. When we say one room. And you're going to eventually get to a space where you're frustrated. The other problem here in South Africa was they stopped the alcohol and they stopped the cigarette sale, which then further created a problem because people who were craving cigarettes could not get cigarettes, even though they were black market cigarettes. But I mean, those are people who have money who can buy that, but the ones who don't have the money can't actually buy it. And alcohol is a form of socialism in South Africa. So you don't.
Okay, did we lose Diane? Okay, Diane, are you still there? Okay, Dorah, are you back? Okay. Portia, are you on?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Okay, so Portia is on, Dorah is on, and Diana is on, right? Okay. Portia, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. Portia is the founder of I Am Great. Very, very passionate about women, motherhood, and supporting mothers in the struggles that they face daily, and empowering them to be able to deal with the challenges that they are facing. I'm so glad that you are with us, Portia. This is Pastor Kelvin Sauls, and you are on Faith Without Borders. We're talking today around the challenge of gender-based violence in South Africa. Our topic today is Man Up, challenging gender-based violence. In the work that you are doing, Portia, can you tell us a little bit about, how this challenge of gender-based violence, how have you observed it happening? How are some of the women that you work with experiencing it? What is the current, state around this epidemic of gender-based violence in South Africa?
Firstly, allow me to say Happy Father's Day to you and good evening.
Thank you.
Yes, I hope you had an awesome Sunday. In what we do, working with women, gender-based violence shapes and determines so much of what we do. In fact, what we have been seeing even during this time of COVID-19, though it's just exacerbated a very ugly and very prevalent issue that we've been dealing with within South Africa. As I said, that it's a very ugly and prevalent situation. So it's just now COVID-19 and the lockdown has expanded and it's taken what was ugly to something that's become a monster. We've now gotten to and how it shapes our work is that when we are assisting mothers, whether they've been now abused by a partner and we have to make sure she gets to the hospital, perhaps she's in labor. There's a lot of work that we do around this issue. And in fact, it takes up quite a bit of the interventions that we do for communities throughout South Africa.
Yeah.
It's been something that needs to be looked into by all areas of society. Government needs to come in. We as families, people in all walks of life, the ministers of the gospel, every corporate needs to come in on this, because this is an issue that it changes who we are as a community and as a society. It impacts the children. When you get into a home and maybe you've been called in the middle of the night and these kids now need to go and be sheltered elsewhere, they now encounter the harsh situations at the police station, then finding alternative housing, it destabilizes the little children and it changes their perceptions of themselves, not just the victims, right? So this now it sort of saturates into society and into children's life in a very early stage. First, and then we see this manifesting in two ways. One, boys will be more prone to be violent because they think this is what being a man is about, and this is how they can protect themselves. And then you find that young girls feel like this is part and course of what a relationship is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when we're hearing these statistics, 1 in 3 has been raped, 1 in 5 has experienced domestic violence. It gives us the stats in terms of numbers, but it doesn't show us the extent of the damage that it has done to our families and our communities.
Yeah.
You know, during lockdown now, we've had a lot of families that have been struggling financially to make ends meet. So we've had initiatives and interventions where we bring food parcels and anything people that they need. And as you enter, you know, they'll call you or reach out to you, and you hear the stories of what people are going through. I had a colleague of mine who told me that in the last 3 months since lockdown, that abuse among the disabled and the vulnerable families has increased by 60%.
Yeah, yeah. So that's certainly an unintended, consequence, yet a real one for so many around, COVID-19. Dorah, I believe that you are back with us. Are you there, Dorah? Can you hear me,
Yes,
Dorah?
yes. I'm here. Yes.
Since that I have the two of you on, and we're having a little challenge with getting Diana back, and we'll pull her in again later on. Talk with me about what is it that we as men, can do to first and foremost, today's event from Nasrec to, Union Buildings, was organized by Act Now. It's men and boys, really taking a stand against gender-based violence. We've seen several music. I've sent you all some music that I've been researching around this. As a man, of course, this pains me, hence, doing this show, which will be the first of many, of course. What can we as men do? I mean, talk with us, Dorah, Portia, around, the prevention of this, the intervention, of it, and eventually the elimination of gender-based violence. Dorah?
I think it starts in the home, and that's what I've been saying before. How we socialize, how we raise our boy children vis-a-vis our girl children, right? So it starts from there, because that's their formation with years. And also how, as men, we relate to our women in our own surroundings, whether at home or at work or in the street, in your community where you are. And I think that the men that are aware of this issue, that every time when they see this form of aggression rise in their fellow men or in a man that they meet on the street, they need to call it out. Because I think it is different when it comes from a man calling out another man. To call it out, to name it what it is, and to make sure that it comes out in the open and not hash it out under the table. So that is what I believe needs to happen. But I also think that we would like to see men taking a stand and taking action. I think the marches, yes, we see that. That's okay. But it's about what happens in the dark. It's about what happens in the boardrooms. It's about what happens outside of the limelight that matters the most. Are we going to see men taking a stand in their homes, in their places of worship, wherever they are, in corporate, which is where another place where a lot of these things start, a lot of the stuff happens, in community groups, in government, everywhere, and taking a stand and condemning this and becoming an example that many of our boys and young men are looking at. We also have got a lot of single parents, single women who are raising boys, And we need men in communities to rise up, to take up a role of mentors and coaches to these young men. Teach them the things that only men could be able to teach, that their single moms won't be able to teach them. So that builds the fabric of community, the fabric of society, a safety net for these young men and women to thrive in a society that is safe, so women can walk without fearing something happening to them. And I think it's teach them simple things, and no means no. Even if it's your girlfriend, when you would like to have a sexual intercourse with them and they don't want it, when they say no, you must just back off. Know that a no is a no. And then they need to be taught from a very young age, because when they grow up, they will be able to understand the point that even when someone is your girlfriend, you can be arrested for sexually violating them purely because they didn't consent to it. Because I think right now we're seeing a lot of that, where these women are not being killed or raped by people that they don't know. They are killed by their partners, which is something that worries. I'm not even talking about the uncles and the granddads and other members of the extended families. So it's important to teach our children this, because they think that when a girl just agreed to become a partner or a girlfriend, that they are entitled to their body, which is not right, which is not correct.
Right.
And they are not being taught these things because
Yes.
purely just because they just don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's just excellent advice, Dorah, and we take it to heart. Portia, are you still with us?
I am.
What can you add, to what Dorah said in terms of, a word to us as men, around prevention, intervention, and elimination of gender-based violence?
For me to add on to that, we really, as Dorah said, we acknowledge that men are coming, they're having the marches, they're speaking out, but we need men to hold other men accountable.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Whether it's in the family setting, whether it's on friendship levels, in the different ministries and churches, and in all areas of society, men need to hold each other accountable. And we need to set new standards. I always find with women there are plenty of opportunities for us to network, to mentor each other. There's always a lot of conferences for women. So men need to have such networks. They need to get to the table and speak to each other and mentor young men. I mean, even the young boys from the earliest age possible, so that what is tolerated, what is acceptable, and how to treat women and young girls.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Let's quickly, before we close out with the two of you, we know that certainly the faith community has a responsibility. I do have a pastor that will join me, from South Africa to talk about that. Because I know, Dorah, you had some concerns that the faith community is not stepping up. That note that you sent me, prompted me to reach out to my colleagues there who are doing something about this. We know that civil society has a responsibility. We know that government has a responsibility. I believe it was, either a couple of months ago, Dorah, or late last year, that some legislation was introduced by the president into Parliament around, legal accountability, for those who have engaged in gender-based violence. Can you just give us an update on where that is, where it has gone, and has it had any impact, on prevention, intervention, and elimination of gender-based violence? Dorah?
I can safely say that I have heard of reports that, as a result of that, there's some improvement in terms of access to reporting, and that, some numbers were mentioned, but also of availability testing keys for women and young girls and that are raped, so that they don't have to wait for a long time. But I'm not seeing a lot of work that is being done on the prevention side. It's almost that what is happening is a response, like in terms of the response side of things, that the country has been getting itself ready. But what are we doing to be able to prevent this? For example, when COVID-19 came, and all these lockdown measures were put in place, and all movements was barred, a lot of thinking didn't go into what will happen in the homes, what will happen to sexual and gender-based violence. Obviously, there were all sorts of rules that were introduced: no alcohol, no cigarettes. What's going to happen? And I think it comes as a last thought. And for me, that worries me, because I think every intervention that is taken, be it COVID or anything, you need all stakeholders on the table. You need to think about the protection of the vulnerable members of your society, the disabled. It's disheartening to hear that abuse of people living with disability has gone up by 60%. We need to be sitting with experts when coming up with response measures to things like that. I understand that the country was not ready for it, but it worries me that issues of gender and women and the most vulnerable members of our society always comes last. We have to think about business and the economy and all of these things, but we don't think about how are we going to put safe measures for the vulnerable members of our society during this time. So I understand. I don't think it's like many other grand policy things in the country. It has really gone far or even influenced the way that planning happens and implementation happens of many of our government programs, because it has to be integrated. It has to be part of it. And it doesn't say it comes as an afterthought. It's like you say, an unintended consequence of the lockdown.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. I mean, government is always reactive in it, and you hear me use three terms together: prevention, intervention, and elimination. And obviously, legislation is always, a reaction, that hopefully can get to prevention and intervention and hopefully elimination. But we've got to get to this prevention piece, and I really appreciate the thoughts that you guys shared for us. Portia, you have any thoughts around what has happened legislatively around this in South Africa?
Okay. Pretty much my thought is this. It's as we have been looking at the issue that has faced most Black Americans and Blacks living in America, it's issues that are systematic and deeply entrenched in institutions, cultures, and traditions, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the very same thing that we need to make sure that in every area of life, in every institution, systematically, that government puts in place measures and things that can be done. Because even right now, I had a case last week. Somebody is being abused by the husband, right? And then the only measure that they could do, the only thing we could do was go to the police station, and then there's a counseling that they provide online. But that's not sufficient. It doesn't treat the needs of women and children and the vulnerable urgently. We need measures that are going to treat these things as they happen with immediate effect, so that we can avoid tragedies such as what has happened in Khofaso's case. We need to act. The government needs to put in measures that where the police and all sorts of structures can act immediately.
Absolutely. You mentioned a piece, Portia, that's really essential here. And Dorah, we touched on this earlier on, and that's just really this whole challenge of, South Africa, has been a society that's been infected with and affected by patriarchy, and how that has just, in so many ways, negatively influenced a lot of folk, especially men, and how we as men have to continue to be in recovery, continue to see how we need to unlearn, some behaviors and some beliefs, how that needs to be deconstructed and then reconstructed, so that we can move towards, equality, as well as, equity, as we dealing with this also on a social and political, a scale for us. Even though our constitution, of course, in South Africa is all about, equality. It talks about equity, but we kind of a ways from equity, given how the economy is structured in South Africa and who controls the economy, in South Africa. But at least, we do have a constitution that upholds, the dignity and the humanity of everybody, including, our women, around that. Let me give the two of you, some final, thoughts that you would like to share with us. Of course, Dorah, Portia, this is the first of many we're going to do, and I know that I can count on your support and participation, should we do another, conversation like this, in a more extensive way, where we can give people strategies and even more strategies and tools as to how we can, deal with this challenge of gender-based violence. Some final thoughts with you. I'll start with Portia and then Dorah. Portia?
Final thoughts for me is that, firstly, before I get onto my final thoughts, I want to acknowledge you for what you're doing and all the men that are out there that are stepping up, because we have many champions, mom supporters, that especially help us in my organization. I just want to give a small indication. There's a gentleman, his name is Enrique Bana, and he runs a shelter for women and children that are abused. He himself and his mom, when he was a young boy in Tukom's wrist, he was a witness to his father abusing the mother. So he's very passionate about protecting women. And he says, he gave me a speech last week, and he says, be the kind of man that when you see someone beating their girlfriend or beating their spouse on the road, whether you know them or not, don't be the kind of guy that flashes your lights and drives away. Be the person that stops and tries to make sure that this woman or this child is going to be okay. We need to be more proactive. We need more men at the forefront of this fight. This is the only way we are going to overcome it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Portia, I know you are part of I Am Great. Can you tell us how we can connect with your organization, I Am Great? Is there a website or a Facebook page that we can connect with, or Instagram page? Maybe we lost Portia. Dorah, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Just some final thoughts from you, my sister.
I think definitely endorsing what Portia has been saying about, really acknowledging the men that are really working hard alongside women to be able to eliminate this and to prevent it. But I think I've also heard some of the great men standing up and saying it's not all men that are like this, right? But I think it's not, it's the same debate that's about Black Lives Matter, people standing up and say all lives matter. It's a matter of acknowledging, and I think it needs to, there's some condemnation should be coming from the men that are not part of this mess to actually stand up and raise their voice and say, we acknowledge what is going on. We acknowledge the brokenness of our society, the brokenness of our young men and boys in this country, and the fact that many fathers have lost their way. They cannot parent their children, and actually take a stand and not try to use their platform and the opportunity to put a spotlight on themselves to say, I am good, right? We need to mobilize those great men who are taking responsibility, who are influential, to put together their resources to come and fight this thing from the roots. It is important that they start in their local families, in their local communities, and build it like that. Because unfortunately, unless we deal with it at the root, we're not going to be able to have a breakthrough. Government can put legislation after legislation. That is needed. That helps us when we have to, get people arrested or doing all sorts of things, or even to access resources for us to be able to run campaigns and programs. But the fabric of society needs to be rebuilt by men that are not part of the problem, that would stand up and be counted and be known in a community. That if this man were to see you doing something like what Portia was describing, they will take you on. And there mustn't be one man, they must build a whole movement within their own communities and their own families, and be trusted by young men to come to them, and also trusted by girls and women to come to them and be open and express themselves. This is what happened to me, without being doubted or questioned.
Yeah.
Which is which is the other problem that discourages many of our girls to keep quiet, and this thing just keeps on running away like petrol fire.
Yeah, absolutely. We must create safe spaces and places and platforms, for women to be able to speak, and for us to affirm that when they do speak, that we will take them at their word, but not just take them at their word, but to really see how we can, cover them, protect them, and facilitate accountability. I remember when I was in San Francisco as a pastor, we were part of a domestic violence campaign there in the black community called It's My Business. Because even, in the black community here, we have this notion that, I got to look the other way because it ain't my business, when somebody's being abused or when somebody's being violated, in any way, shape, or form. And so what we are saying is, yes, it is my business. When there is a violation of the humanity and the dignity of anybody, it is my business. As a person of faith, because I serve a God that is concerned about every aspect of who I am and what I'm about, it is my business. And we join, here at Faith Without Borders, the plethora, thousands and millions of voices of men, in South Africa and around the world, condemning gender-based violence. It is not who we are. It is not what God has intended for us to be. And we pray for the abolishment of this patriarchal system that gives us, a false sense of superiority and power, and to see how we can resist it and reimagine a society, a community of equality and equity as we move forward, so that, our girls, our women, our sisters, our mothers, our aunts, so that they can be protected because, of who we are and what we've been called to be. When I was in South Africa earlier this year, I had the opportunity to both preach, for a Men's Day in the township of Annandale, as well as speak to a group of high school students in Annandale, where my brother Kelvin Sauls is the principal. And the Men's Day was at the Annandale Methodist Church, and both of those events I focused on challenging gender-based violence from a faith-based perspective. At the church, my sermon title was "Being on Purpose," and to talk with men there that if you want to be on purpose, part of your purpose is not the abuse, of women, the objectification of women, and the violation of women. That is not the purpose that God has called you for. You have a greater purpose, a higher purpose, and that purpose is the affirmation of women, the protection, of women, collaboration, with women, and of course the transformation of all structures, that contribute, to disrespect and disregard for women. When I was at the high school, I used the scripture from Jeremiah 29, verse 11. Know the plans that I have for you, plans not to bring you harm, but plans to give you a future and a future of hope. And as I talk with those boys and girls or those educators at that high school, I basically shared with them around God's plan and God's purpose for them. And that is that we are not to bring harm to one another, but to see how we can help one another live into the future of hope that God has for all of us. That is not just for boys, but for boys and girls. And so we will continue to spread this message of hope, empowerment, protection, affirmation, of the dignity and the humanity of our sisters. So I thank Dorah Marema for joining me. I want to thank, Portia for joining me, and looking forward to our ongoing work together as we work to dismantle and resist patriarchal structures and reimagine, society structures of equality and equity. We want to go now to, some activism and play a song for you. This song is part of a comrade of mine who has been a voice for us in so many spaces and places. That is Mzwaki Mbuli, and here he is, with, as part of his work of saying that gender-based violence must fall. Here's Mzwaki Mbuli celebrating and affirming our women and their need for affirmation and protection.
Mama enkosi, hey mama, hey mama, hey mama, hey mama enkosi.
We are born of mothers. Mothers are precious. Ladies are precious. Women are precious. Women are
Mama enkosi.
We are born of mothers. Mothers are precious. Ladies are precious. Women are precious. Women are caregivers by nature. They need protection and respect. Women are often abused and killed by men who claim to love them. Women are no punching bags. They need love and support. Walandini niasilulaza.
Welcome back. This is Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls. So glad that you're joining us today. The title of our show today is Man Up, Fighting Against Gender-Based Violence in South Africa. Man Up, Fighting Against Gender-Based Violence in South Africa. Today, of course, we are tackling this challenge, this epidemic, if you will, of gender-based violence in the land of my birth, South Africa. And I've had the privilege of talking with some leaders who are at the forefront of fighting gender-based violence. Today in South Africa was a huge car parade from Johannesburg to Pretoria to the Union buildings. That's the executive branch of the South African government, kind of like the White House, if you will. Men and boys in cars driving from Johannesburg to Pretoria to meet with the President of South Africa around the challenge of gender-based violence in South Africa, the epidemic, of that. It was a joy for me early on to talk with three women, from South Africa who are part of frontline communities, engaging in the prevention, intervention, and the elimination of, gender-based violence. And as part of that conversation, we, of course, talked about the different sectors of society that need to respond to, what's going on around gender-based violence in South Africa. And, of course, because this is Faith Without Borders, the faith community is a community that we would want to engage around this. And I want to thank my friend and colleague, Bishop Sidwell Mkhotu of the Limpopo district of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa for connecting me, with Reverend Bufana Khumalo, who's going to join us, today for the work that he has been doing, he and his organization. The Reverend Bufana Khumalo is an ordained minister in the Lutheran Church of Southern Africa. He's also, the executive director of Sonke Gender Justice, an NGO working, on, gender justice and equality in South Africa, doing extraordinary work. And so glad that we are connecting for this conversation, to hear from him as well as, what his organization is doing. Let's see if Reverend Khumalo is with us. Reverend Khumalo, are you there?
Good evening, Kelvin. I think it's morning for you.
Yes,
it's evening for us.
Yeah, it's still morning here for us.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I'm still drinking my coffee, trying to wake up here, Reverend Khumalo. So.
Yeah, good for you, my man. But as you know, it's Father's Day here, so I'm having people in my house just to celebrate fatherhood.
Yes.
But even on this day, we are reflecting on the difficult challenges that are confronting us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
and I wanted to say Happy Father's Day to you. I sent a note to Bra Bishop early this morning, actually last night, which was, the morning there. Appreciate all that you all are doing and, just the work. And thank you for taking time out, from family, to talk with us about this. Reverend, why don't we start a little bit about maybe you telling us, what Sonke, is all about, so we can just get a sense of, who you are and what you are doing, being an ordained minister in the Lutheran Church, and also, working with Sonke Gender Justice, and what is that the organization is about.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting us, Kelvin. Sonke Gender Justice is an NGO, a non-profit organization, about 14 years of age now, working in the area of HIV, gender, and human rights. As you will know, Kelvin, the word Sonke means all of us, because we believe that gender or issues of gender equality should be of concern to all of us in society. For too long, these matters have been left to women to carry the burden of transforming society, particularly transforming masculinities that are toxic, that are creating all sorts of problems for women and girls in our society. So a few colleagues met in 2006, myself, Dean Peacock, who were the co-founder, with a colleague from Cape Town, Shamila Wilson. And we conceived this idea to find a platform where we can bring all these sectors together so that we all focus on this important quintessential question of gender transformation in our society.
Absolutely, congratulations, and so glad to hear, that almost 15 years ago, men came together, to engage in the conceptualization and the organization of the Sonke, gender justice. That just makes my heart melt, because the last couple of weeks, my heart has just been very, very pained, by what is going on around gender-based violence in South Africa, and how COVID-19 really has exacerbated, this challenge. And also, I received, the information about Sister Pule, apparently, who was, raped and hung on a tree. That just, as we are fighting against, white supremacy here in the United States, and as we're dealing with systemic racism here, this hanging over a tree, this lynching, has entered, of course, once again, the forefront of this conversation, here in the United States. So as I'm receiving that word from the land of my birth, and as I'm engaging, in the land where I live, around the challenges, of, patriarchy, sexism, et cetera, I just felt a heavy, perfect storm, coming together. And so I wanted to have this conversation as soon as I could, with, my South African sisters and brothers, to just see how we can, support. And then, of course, that huge event today that took place, men and boys from Joburg to Pretoria around that. So I just want to affirm you and celebrate you and the leadership of Sonke Gender Justice in the work, that you are doing. Can you give us a sense, Reverend Khumalo, around what's the current challenge that we are facing around gender-based justice in South Africa?
Well, Kelvin, let me first acknowledge your role in contributing to the challenge we are facing. The fact that you are in other parts of the world currently, it could be easy for you to simply forget where you are from. So we really appreciate that you still are part of us spiritually. And this is very important. It's part of the Ubuntu-ness that is in you, which, of course, you can't extricate yourself from. Mm-hmm. So your sense of solidarity, we appreciate very much. We need more men like you in our society who have this sense of duty and responsibility to care for our sisters, because we are our sisters' keeper.
Yes, sir.
The challenge we are facing, of course, Trevor, is what one feminist writer, coined this concept of intersectionality. What has been happening in the States, with the George Floyd saga and the many other killings that have been happening there due to racism, is not far from what is happening in our society, where we see women's bodies being weaponized and brutalized almost every day of our lives. And there is a connection between these struggles, and I think we need to maintain the solidarity of always being together in the trenches to try and transform the world for the better. Mm-hmm. As you know, South Africa is still a very patriarchal society, mm-hmm. and patriarchy is premised on the notion that, you see the world through the eyes of men, to the benefit of men, to the gratification of men. So women are seen as providers of pleasure and satisfaction for men. And this is at the core of the problem. And unfortunately, we don't take this very seriously in South Africa, which is why gender-based violence continues to be so rampant. Because men do these things with impunity in many instances. They get away with it either because society excuses these men who commit these acts, or you find even people are excusing them. You know, when a woman is abused, when a man is abusive to their partner, people will find excuses. What did she do? She must have done something wrong. He can't just be, you know, assaulting her and doing all these dastardly things. And I talked about intersectionality because it resonates with me when I follow what is happening in the U.S. Where black bodies, particularly black men, are almost at risk, even for just being outside of their houses, you know, for doing nothing except being black. You know, that you can be stopped and a policeman can ask you in your car to produce whatever, and just at a whim produce a gun, not because you have done anything wrong, but simply because you are black. And this is a similar context where women are almost facing these challenges every day of their lives, where when they have to leave their house, they have to think, am I safe? Will I get to work safely? Will I come back to my children? But even at the workplace, you know, you have episodes of sexual harassment carried out by bosses in the factory floors. And the way the law is very lenient. In terms of the books, the law is very strong. We have a strong constitution, but the implementation remains a problem.
Yeah.
Which therefore disincentivize men from not doing these things because they know they can do these things and get away with it. You prefaced the story of Pule, Tsofatso Pule in Soweto. This woman, Kelvin, was not only hanged, she was stabbed 8 times. Stabbed 8 times, and then they hanged her, you know. I mean, who does something like that? And a woman who is 8 months pregnant, you know. And these are the challenges that we are facing. Just in this week, we are talking over 30 women that have died brutally at the hands of what we call intimate partners. And we need, I'm challenging men in South Africa, we need to do self-reflection. What is it that in us men drives us to do these things? Because it's not something that can be corrected by somebody outside of us. The fundamental key for me is for me as Bafana Khumalo to say, what is it in me that makes me see women as lesser than me, that I can do whatever I can to them because they are less than me? And in any of these systems where you denigrate people and make them look lesser than you, it becomes easier to do these dastardly acts on them. And in South Africa, therefore, we have to confront this reality. Because one of the surest things is that GBV cuts across class, it cuts across race, it cuts across status. It's not only black women that are dying. Yes, majority is black women, but you also have white women dying. You have women of color dying in South Africa at the hands of their intimate partners. Not killed by strangers, but by people that they know, in many instances, people that have professed that they love them and that they want to live their lives with them. And this is the challenge that is confronting us. But I think there are seeds of hope, Trevor, because just this morning we launched a massive program with the Catholic Bishops' Conference, the South African Council of Churches, where we are focusing on bringing men of faith into this space of gender-based violence and challenging them to be champions for change and transformation in the area of gender equality.
Wow, I'm elated about that, and would want to pledge, my support, and my platform and network to that, and we'll definitely talk, some more about how we can, support that, Reverend Khumalo, because I think that's what needs to happen. Which brings me to, my final question, and that is, what has the response been of the faith community, and how can, the faith community do more? Because in so many ways, we use scripture and especially the faith, the faith tradition in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, those major religions. We use our scriptures to justify patriarchy, and the inferiority of women. Can you just, as a faith leader at the forefront, what's our responsibility as the faith community around the prevention of, intervention to, and elimination of gender-based violence?
There's a great responsibility for us, Kelvin. In fact, I must say I'm quite happy that, we met just a week ago with faith leaders. I wasn't sure whether they will be responding, but the response has been overwhelming. Most faith leaders are on board. Many of them are extremely embarrassed by what is happening in our country, to a sense where they feel much more needs to be done. Now, we are pushing people to say, it's not enough to say we are embarrassed, we are ashamed. It's not enough to issue statements. We have issued too many statements. We now need to get out there and be counted. Jesus would not be sitting in a synagogue and writing a press statement about what is happening. He would be out there meeting with the survivors of gender-based violence, challenging the system that is failing women daily, and encouraging the survivors and giving them hope that change will happen. And so we have a 100-day intervention on a pilot program where we'll be developing liturgies, sermonettes. We have developed a video, which I will send to you after this, Kelvin. And we have developed a pledge that has been reverberating in most of our faith communities. As you know, we are on lockdown now, so most of this is happening over virtually. But we are calling on men to sign up, and there's extreme excitement with this process where men are pledging to stand up and be counted. We are calling on the faith leaders to be champions for change, to speak out against gender-based violence. We are calling on them not to look the other way. We are calling on them to create a safe space in their sanctuaries so that survivors of gender-based violence can find a home where they will not be condemned, but they will be embraced and journeyed with and helped with psychosocial support so that they deal with the challenges that they are facing. We will be developing other mechanisms within the 100 days of engaging our constituency to say we cannot do this in the name of God. Yes. We cannot do this in the name of men. Mm-hmm. As men, we stand with women side by side to say, let us end gender-based violence. That is our role as the church, that we must lead from the front on these matters.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Reverend Khumalo. Thank you for your patience. I know it took us a while to get to you, but we were working through some technical challenges. And, of course, we had, the women on first, and I wanted to make sure we give them, a platform. But I'm so glad, that you were patient enough to wait for us, and you have certainly, assured, my spirit, and I know many of us who stand in solidarity with you around what the faith community can do. Let me pledge support, for that, initiative that was just launched and solidarity with it. And I look forward to receiving that video and to try and see how we can accompany you from here around, allowing the faith community to be the headlight, on the prevention, intervention, and elimination of gender-based violence. Again, blessed Father's Day to you. The Lord bless and keep you, and I'm looking forward to our ongoing communication and collaboration. Thank you so much, Reverend Bufana, Khumalo, Presbyterian Church, as well as, the Lutheran Church, as of Southern Africa, and the Executive Director of Sonke Gen Justice. It is about all of us, and we're looking forward to our work together. Yeah. Thank you so much, Reverend Khumalo. Yes, blessings.
All for the best. Safe.
Thank you, sir. We want to close out with just a very, very powerful video. This is Madota Sabelani. It is a very, very powerful song, by Loyiso Guyana, and it is a video that will show the images, of sisters who we have lost, to gender-based violence. Here at Faith Without Borders, our goal is provocative conversation for solutions-driven, opportunities, and we will continue to allow opportunities like this, for conversation. This is Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls. Man up. Gender-based violence must fall.
City Emma tota sabelani, Emma tota sabelani, abafazi bayalila, ayolekos, city lekos, iyolekos, Emma tota mamelani, Emma tota mamelani. Sabelani, Emma tota sabelani, Emma tota nadani, Iolekos, Emma tota mamelani, Emma tota sabelani, Emma tota nandani. Oh, Iolekos, city lekos, Emma tota sabelani, Emma tota sabelani. Emma tota sabelani.